Today at Petrochemical Strategies, the new normal part 3. In the final installment of this series, we talked to Bob Sittmann, president of Northeastern Chemical Association, about the new normal facing his organization. It's May 18 in the year 2020. In the first installment of the new normal, I talked to Dennis Seith, president of the Founders Club and retired executive from INEOS. Last week, I spoke to Kelly Knopp, Petrochemicals executive and founder of Citronic Chemicals. Before I get into my conversation today with Bob Sittmann, I'd like to talk about the current situation in the market and how it's affecting petrochemicals. These charts were published by the US Census Bureau on May 15th. The chart on the left shows estimates for retail and food service sales in April, adjusted for seasonal variation, holidays, and trade day differences. Sales were down over 16% from March, and March was down over 8% from February. The chart on the right shows a breakdown by major business segment. From February to March, the automotive segment took a big hit, but general merchandise looked pretty good. That all changed in April when all segments were down. This chart shows the changes in monthly sales by business kind from March to April. At the bottom of the chart, you can see that the segments of furniture and home furnishings, electronics and appliances, and clothing have all experienced tremendous month-on-month sales losses. In the middle of the chart, you can see that gasoline sales are off by almost 30%. The only bright spot is the non-store retailer segment. This includes companies like Amazon. So what does this mean for the US petrochemicals industry? Well, the first round of crackers are already built, and they brought about 10 million pounds of capacity to the US ethylene market. There are 3 other crackers currently under construction. These are the Baystar cracker in Port Arthur, Texas, which is the joint venture between Total and Borealis, Shell in NECA, Pennsylvania, where construction has been slowed, and SABIC ExxonMobil in Corpus Christi. I expect that we're going to see more announcements about idled capacity. Dow idled 3 polyethylene units, and I expect other companies are looking at underutilized assets and thinking the same thing. In this tight capital environment, reduction of spending is inevitable. We've seen announcements from Shell, Exxon, Lyondell, Saudi Aramco, to name a few. So I expect companies are all thinking about how they're going to spend their capital moving forward. We haven't seen announcements of layoffs, and that is good news for the American petrochemical worker. Let's turn our attention now to my discussion about the new normal with Bob Sittmann. Bob is the president of Northeastern Chemical Association and has spent his entire career in refining and petrochemicals. Here's that discussion. So Bob, you had an impressive career spanning refining and petrochemicals, most recently as director of specialty products at PBF Refinery. Today, I'd like to ask you about your role as president of Northeastern Chemical Association, or most people call it NECA. First, could you tell me a little bit about NECA? What's your mission and vision, and who do you serve?
Northeastern Chemical Association was first set up in 1977, and has been been around for 40 some odd years. Our goal is to support education, science education, with grants and scholarships and endowments. And we have a handful of colleges and universities that we have endowments to. We have a total of $700,000 to these schools. And last year we did $21,000 in scholarships and $5,000 to the Liberty Science Center to support high school science programs.
You've been through a lot of major events in your career. I think around in the market collapse, and I think it was in 2000, the 9/11 attacks on the US, the financial collapse in 2009, where oil dropped $100 a barrel in a few short months. So each time as an industry, we've been able to recover. So what's the same today with coronavirus, and what's different?
Well, what's different now with this is that it's been voluntary. People are staying home. They're not driving. And they're not working. I mean, we saw the unemployment results come out today. It was certainly sobering. But anyway, but the one thing is, once all these people go back to work, once the actors and waiters and the service providers that are that can't do their jobs now, once they get back to work, I suspect that our economy will bounce back fairly quickly. I mean, if you look at what the price, where the stock market was a year ago, it's about where we are today. And what's the difference between a year ago and today? Well, it's the virus. So once we get the okay to go outside, which many states have already started, we'll see this economy come booming back.
Well, let's turn our attention specifically to NECA, the organization you're the president of. I looked at your 2018 tax return, and one thing that I saw was very interesting is you had about $150,000 worth of revenue. The vast majority of that, about $140,000 of that, comes from what they call program service revenue. I assume these are your fundraising events, and the remainder basically coming from membership dues. You know, a lot of businesses, as you mentioned, are struggling, and they'd be lucky to have a third of the revenue this year as they had last year. So how are donations and what is the outlook that you have for donations, revenue, and expenses in 2020 and beyond?
Well, we're going to take a hit. I expect maybe we'll probably lose half. Didn't cancel, but have delayed the Philadelphia outing. That's where we meet some of the students that we give scholarships to. We have canceled the golf outing that would have been at Seaview at the end of May here. It just was not in the cards. We're not having the Montreal event or the Canadian event, but we will move the Philadelphia event into the fall. And then the big is the holiday luncheon at the Plaza Hotel in December. We're going to see about half the amount of money we got in previous years. But what's important is that the Plaza Hotel has been very, very willing to work with us to allow us to continue the holiday luncheon, which has become, for the last 40 years, has become such a integral part of our industry. You know.
So that leads me very nicely into my next question. The organization has corporate sponsors, obviously, but a lot of the money also has to come from corporations indirectly through members who are able to expense going to the golf events or going to the luncheon, as you mentioned. Now, I think with the economy tightening up as it is, I can see major companies putting restrictions on non-discretionary spending. Have you had the chance to speak to the executives in the chemical industry who send their employees to NECA as members? What would you say to them this year and beyond?
Let them come. No, I think, again, it's going to be tough this first year. It really, and how next year, 2021 looks will depend on how quick our recovery is. I'm an optimist. I think that once people start getting back to work and things start moving again, our recovery will be pretty quick. But I do believe there is a certain amount of importance that it should be placed on person-to-person contact and customer-to-supplier contact. And I think that's very important in our industry. And the thing, and what's good about the Northeastern Chemical Association and the AFPM is that in a small space of time, you bring a lot. It's very efficient to bring a lot of people into one spot where you can, if you might, only time you ever see your customer is at the Northeastern Chemical Association, and developing relationships that way is just good for business.
So personal contact at these events and networking, these are all very important elements of fundraising in your membership strategies. And they may look quite differently after we recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. What do you envision as NECA's new normal?
Well, interesting enough, we had a discussion about that last night. Some of the board members were on a conference call. One of the drawbacks of the Northeast Chem is that it's really not Northeast based anymore. Most of the members are from Texas and Louisiana and the Midwest. So our members are further away. So that is a problem that we'll have to deal with as we rebuild the organization. We're just going to have to think a little bit out of the box. But our one big drawback is that we have only 4 meetings a year, and you start counting out those meetings, and things start to slow down.
So I have one last question for you. In my very first video blog, I mentioned that I brought home a bottle of wine and washed it, and I've never done before. But something that I may continue doing even after this this is all over, and just kind of more conscientious about the cleanliness of the stuff that I bring into my home. So what's the one thing you're doing differently as part of your personal new normal?
Well, I thought I would never walk into a bank wearing a mask. Okay, or a liquor store for that matter. I actually, when you told me about the washing a bottle of wine, I was coming from the liquor store. I had just bought a case of wine, and I was thinking, but it's in the case. Okay, nobody's handled it. It's in the case. Do I need to wash all these 12 bottles of wine? And I said, well, I chose not to, so I don't know.
Bob, I appreciate you taking a few moments to talk to us today and giving us your perspective from a person who's been in the industry for a long time and as president of Northeastern Chemical Association. So thank you very much. And
you're very welcome. I appreciate it. It was a good time.
So what is the new normal for the petrochemicals industry? Well, I think the sentiment for plastics has changed a little bit, at least on the medical and food packaging side, but that doesn't mean there's going to be an increased demand for plastic drinking straws. Also, the feedstock advantage we saw over the last decade here in the US is totally wiped out, which means there's going to be increased global competition. This in turn will lead to the increased need for target marketing in the industry. Finally, what we learned from the Founders Club and Northeastern Chemical Association is we're going to need to learn how to work, meet, and greet much differently. I want to thank Dennis Seith, Kelly Knopp, and Bob Sittmann for the contributions to this new normal series that I've had here at Petrochemical Strategies. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any comments, go to our website at petrochemicalstrategies.com. I will see you next time.